John Murphy is the founder and CEO of Venture Management Consultants. It's a global firm specializing in operational excellence and transformational leadership, and a fellow faculty member at Fuel with yours truly. He's an award-winning
Excellent.
author of 20 books, a former Notre Dame quarterback, and sought-after advisor to Fortune 500 executives and military leaders across more than 50 countries. If you've ever thought, I'm responsible for change, but you actually don't have the power to change anything, this episode is for you. Today on Leadership Live, we are going to jump into Kaizen. And I just wanted to, John, welcome you, man. Like you do podcasts everywhere, you speak everywhere. How are you, brother? Welcome to Leadership Live.
Oh, life is good, Donnie. I'm loving life. I wake up in the morning just so grateful, and I think that's a critical factor in leadership is that positive vibe that people put out. You know, you instead of waking up in the morning and getting glued to emails and your phone and the news and that delegating your agenda, so to speak, first thing in the morning to external factors. I don't do that. I wake up and I meditate. I get centered. I get grounded. No matter what time I start my day, and in other countries, it's in the middle of the night, so to speak, when you get over there. And but I still get up 2 hours early just to get grounded, and I don't turn on the TV or the news or anything like that. It's a very powerful approach to the day and to life in terms of mindset.
Wow. I mean, if we're not giving to ourselves, like how can we expect to actually have anything to give to others? And I love that. I hope to get into some of your message about flow and how you are able to take personal intention and connect it to these other things that are coming your way to create
Yeah.
uncanny results. I can't wait to get into that. But talk to us about Kaizen. Like this is different than what most of us are doing. It- what is this? What is Kaizen, John?
Well, okay, Kaizen well, it's a Japanese term. It's actually two words put together. So Kai, essentially means to take apart and make new. And then Zen is all about harmony and balance and flow, and rhythm. It's in peace, So how do you take a dysfunctional process that has, 20 steps and 10 touch points and takes 4 weeks? How do you pull a team together to examine it and get it and down to 5 steps, 3 touch points in 2 days? And it's very possible to do that because when you actually examine the way we do a lot of work, which is culture, it's the way we do things around here, and you discover that it's just overly complex, and you pull a group of bright people together. I like to call it tapping the genius of the team. No one on the team has to
Mm.
be a genius, but when you pull together and you align and you're focused on a clear mission, and that mission is by Friday, we're going to have a new process in place, not designed, not blueprinted, not, we'll launch it in the next quarter. No, it's in play already. I'm talking about policy change, process change, just the way we do whatever that process happens to be. And it's mind blowing. And really, what it is, it's a demonstration of a different culture within a culture. And I love the quote from Gandhi years ago. In fact, I'm wearing a Be the Change t-shirt right now. Be it, don't think become. Because a lot of companies think about, well, we're going to change our culture and it takes 3 years to actually do that. Guess how long it's going to take? More than that, because 2 years into it, you're going to go, we need 3 more years. And it's just clumsy and dysfunctional. And so if we can in 1 week demonstrate how we make decisions quickly and effectively using a rational model and where there's 100% alignment, when we pull a team together, I don't let the team pitch it to the senior execs until everyone on the team agrees it's better. We also do things like a risk analysis. So not just what's the risk of making the change, what's the risk of not making the change? What we call cost of doing business, CODN. So if the way we're doing it now costs X, and we get that data, we get those facts, that's part of the alignment process. And we do the analysis, we get to root causes, we come up with solutions, and we implement, we're going to implement these, and we do the risk analysis on the change. It's always riskier to leave it the old way. Always. So people embrace change. They get excited about change. They're like, wow, I can't even believe we're actually making these changes that fast. So we're not just changing a process in a week, Donnie, we're changing mindsets. People who are afraid on Monday, and I've had rocket scientists on these teams, literally rocket scientists tell me on Monday, there's no way we can get this done in a week, John. You don't understand the way it is around here. We're talking
Mm.
about government agencies. We're talking about defense, contracts. There's just no way. And then on Friday, when the changes are made, they just can't believe it. So I love that, Donnie. I mean, I'm having the time of my life leading these teams through the change process without any authority at all. I have zero authority.
I love it. I want to talk to you about the zero authority because I think a lot of times that's what like leaders step into something and we feel disqualified before we ever begin. But before that, by the way, if you're listening live, especially if you've logged into through Zoom, we can see your questions here. Throw questions at John. I would love to know like the biggest change or transition or transformation you've ever seen or you've ever made. I know a lot of you people over on LinkedIn were former John students, and so would love to hear maybe of something that you've seen out there. But John, this is I want to know maybe the pain of someone who needs Kaizen, right? The pain of a manager who is maybe trying to juggle it all, trying to do it all. Maybe they feel like they're swimming upstream. What would you say is the general condition of someone that like they they don't know that this approach is about to be their best friend?
Yeah, well, that's just it. The root cause to every problem on the planet, if you get down to the fifth level of why, is ignorance. And we just don't know any better. If we knew better, we'd do better. So that's why I start with education. And I start with education at the very senior level. So I bring the C-suite together and we do a 2-day workshop on Lean and Six Sigma and operational excellence and Kaizen so that they understand what's coming
Hmm.
culturally and get behind it. Because if the senior leadership doesn't get behind it, Donnie, I walk away. Like, you know what? This is not worth my time. It's not worth your time. And I've actually had them call me back and say, "Wait a minute, consultants don't walk away from us,
I
aren't you
do,
guys?"
right? Yeah.
So
What
it starts
what
with
would
that. And so to a manager, who's struggling
yeah,
and
give me the before.
overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yeah, for one of the first people I'll quote when I teach this is E.F. Shoemaker, who said, any intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to go in the opposite direction. Translation: when you think you need to add, think subtract, think delete, because we are good at adding complexity, adding people, adding training, adding space, adding inventory. We just add. It's human
Oh,
nature. So you've heard me talk about the closet space syndrome. We fill up the closets and then we think we need bigger closets or more closets. And I'm like, no, you don't. What you need to do as a manager is you need to start examining what people are doing, the processes they're using, the tasks. I just saw an example where there's an office manager reportedly doing 40 tasks. And I've observed this, and these tasks are like administrative, and half of them could be automated. But the manager's like overwhelmed because they're doing a bunch of stupid stuff and no one's doing anything about it. So I use the model DMAIC. It's a global best practice, and it's DMAIC. We start with define. Let's define the current state, just exactly uh, what are we doing? Let's define the target we're going to aim at, the process we're going to improve. Okay. Now let's populate it with measures and facts. It's like going to the doctor and getting a checkup. We get measurements, and from those measurements, we identify what I call UDEs, undesirable effects. So this would be in front of a doctor, your blood pressure is way over the standard, or your blood sugar levels are off, or who knows what, right? But in business, those headaches are things like customers complaining, over complexity. We're taking 50 steps to do something that we could do in 5. We're taking, here's an example. And one client was taking 184 days to make a vitamin tablet from in the door to out the door. And it took 14.2 miles inside one complex. It was absolutely crazy. And this was a product for Walmart. Walmart was said, we're tired of this. And so if you don't fix this quick, you're done. And we're talking about a multi-billion dollar company. And so I went in and helped them. We mapped it out. We discovered 14.2 miles. We discovered $300 million in inventory just sitting there. That's not flow, Donnie. That is constipation, big time in business. You know, so, we went through the DMAIC process. We defined, we measured, then we analyzed, got to root cause of the undesirable effects. Why is it taking so long? Why are we going back and forth so many times? Why are there so many steps in the process? And we get down to design. Why, and if that's the fourth level of why, if we went one more, it'd be ignorance. We don't know how to do it better. So let's figure that out, which we do. But you get down to design, you get down to policy, you get down to the lack of measurements or the wrong measurements. We're not measuring the right thing, we're measuring the wrong things. So for example, let's just say we have a 10-step process and we're measuring the steps like silos, and they're all efficient. And we're trying to figure out how do we make this step more efficient. Guess what? You can have 10 efficient steps in a horribly inefficient stream flow. And so we're looking at the wrong places. We're looking at improving tasks when, number one, they could be eliminated. If not eliminated, they could be optimized. If not optimized, they could be delegated. So for that manager that's overwhelmed, think those three things. What can I eliminate? What can I just stop doing? What can I subtract? And if I can't, how can I make it better? It might even involve AI these days, right? Or some kind of automation. A human shouldn't even have to do this. And if that's not the case, it's got to be done by a human. Does it have to be done by me, the manager? In many cases, no. It's your ego that's getting in the way. Get out of your own way and learn how to build trust in your organization. There's a human factor. Learn how to align people. Make sure they understand what needs to be done and why. Here's the other thing I'll say is when you're really clear on the what you want in life, whether it's an individual or a business, and you know why it's important, and the why goes beyond the ego. It's not just about what's in it for me, but what's in it for we. So you've got the what and the why. The how shows up. The how just shows up. That's energy. But a lot of people are so worried about the how, they never get off the ground because I don't know. Look, when I started my practice 38 years ago, I didn't know how to do it. So, and there was no fuel where I could go and learn a lot online and I could learn quick with podcasts. There wasn't even internet access back then, right? And so what do? You surround yourself with brilliant people. If you want to be brilliant, start by hanging out with brilliant people. Well, I don't know Einstein. I don't know Tesla. Well, I can learn about them, right? And I can read books from people past and
Oh
present.
yeah.
I was a total self-study like guru, if you will. Um, I'm sitting in a library just full of books. And what I love too, Donnie, is that, I was thinking about people that I had really admired. I just thought these guys are gurus. And now I've been on stage with a bunch of them. They've got signed books that they've given me, and they've attended my workshops. So, in fact, I reached out to one of them this morning. I won't mention names, but I think there's so much value in attendees learning about fuel, for example. It's such a great learning platform. We've got great faculty members, right? And it's easy and it's it's pennies a day, essentially, right?
For sure. I listen, anything that can accelerate learning. I want to go back into the Kaizen part of this because it's almost like you describe two people. You describe by people, it could be companies or leaders. And you have the one that is so busy doing that they don't have a they haven't evaluated should this be done or am I walking 14.2 miles or whatever. It's say the one that's so busy doing they're not thinking. And then you have on the other end of the spectrum, the person who's so busy thinking and planning that there is no doing. how do you approach those, and how do we solidify message, or not message, I should say mission, uh, if if we're on one of those ends of the spectrum? How do we bring people back in with mission?
Yeah, well, one of our mantras, great question. One of our mantras in Kaizen events is better, not best. So by Friday, it's going to be better than it is now,
Better,
but
not
it won't be
best.
perfect. So, people fear making changes when they think they have to be perfect. We've got to come up with the perfect solution. No, you don't. It's not perfect now. It won't be perfect by Friday. Relax. So I get teams to relax and trust the process. I tell them, you don't have to trust me. I mean, in many cases, they don't even know me until I show up. I don't know their language. I don't know their culture, but I know the
I'm
tool
so curious
set.
about that. Yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
curious about the non-authority that you walk in and you're still able to get people into alignment here.
Well, and here's the other thing I think so important is credibility. Any leader's got to have credibility. And what does that mean? It means they're believable, right? People believe they know what they're doing and they're relatable. I use a Socratic method. Socrates once said, true wisdom is knowing you know nothing. I go in basically saying, I don't know your process. Walk me through it. Tell me how this works. Tell me how. I just go in asking a lot of deep questions to come up with, I'm asking questions they don't ask.
Hmm.
They don't know how long it takes. They don't know how many steps are in the process. They're not even looking at the same measures I am. They go out, I've walked through a warehouse. This was the company with $300 million sitting in raw material. And I said, have you guys ever seen $300 million before? The CFO came close, but no one else in the executive team had any idea. This is $300 million. How long does it sit here? What are your inventory turns? Two a year. And you know what they think? We need a bigger warehouse. We need a second warehouse. Like, no. If you go from 2 turns to 4 turns, you just doubled your space without spending anything.
Hmm.
But that's a completely different way. So how do you gain credibility? You become an avid learner. Okay. And, I've mentored under some really, really great people. You've got to admit you don't know it all. In fact, you know
Hmm.
very little. So that makes you hungry for learning, is when you get out of your own way, you get out of that ego. So and you wanted to come back to Kaizen. So Kaizen is basically, it translates into good change in short. Good change. We're going to make good change by the end of the week in a Kaizen event. And the event is an application of Kaizen. So prior to the event, we're going to train a Kaizen team. I train the team about a month ahead. Then we spend a month collecting data on the defined and measured. Using DMAIC, we define the team, we define the mission, we define the charter, the milestones, the expectations, the timing. We define that. Then we get out and we measure the current state. Just all these. By the way, here's another excuse. A lot of people think they have to get all this data to make change. No, you don't, because that's an excuse to not make change.
Delays
We
you,
need more
right?
data.
Yeah.
We need more people to study it. We need to bring in more consultants and spend 6 months studying it. No, you don't. If you've got blatant UDIs, you got customers calling you up saying, where's my stuff? Why doesn't it? Why can't I track it? Why doesn't it work? And you're going to spend 6 months to fix that? That's ludicrous. But this gets back to mindset. At Apple Computer, every phone call that a customer makes is considered a problem. But they should never have to call us. Why are people calling us? To order stuff? You can order a Tesla without ever talking to a person.
Hmm.
I know people that just shows
Hmm.
up in their driveway
Hmm.
to their specification. That's lean. That's what we refer to as lean and Lean Six Sigma,
Hmm.
operational excellence. That's what I teach. And I know we've got a number of master black belts on the LinkedIn from, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 different countries who know exactly what I'm talking about because we've been doing it. Some of these students, if you will, are proteges from 20, 25 years ago. And I continue to stay in touch with them because we built a relationship and a trust. So it isn't just like this consultant comes in and messes things up or does all this stuff and disappears. We build trusting relationships. And that's deep, Donnie. That's not just, selling fish. It's teaching to fish and then cultivating that culture change and that relationship.
Yeah, it's almost like you get orchestrated action from a whole where this guy might be firing this way, this guy, they're firing possibly in different directions, all with their unique inefficiencies. But I'm curious as to how maybe if you could think of a big problem that someone thought was really, really big that was solved within days instead of years. Like, can you think of any examples that are coming to mind where orchestrated action was the result of something like this?
Oh, I could come up with dozens probably, Donnie, but I've got one that popped into my mind. But before I get to that, you used the term orchestrate, and I love that because I use the metaphor of an orchestra. You've got all these people, maybe 100 people with different instruments and different roles. My job is to be the conductor. And how do I get them to pull together and play as one so that it sounds good. It's a high performance. But the example that comes to my mind, yeah, this was in Washington, D.C. with the Department of Defense and a naval group. And believe it or not, it was on a nuclear missile. And it involved policy and in governance in a certain way. And so on Monday, a literal rocket scientist, PhD statistician, is telling me, he's giving me a hard time. And he's like, Murphy, you're out of your mind if you think we can actually do this in a week. You don't understand the government. You don't understand how we do things around here. I said, well, let's just trust the process. You don't have to trust me. He's like, and on Tuesday, he's even worse and he's disruptive now. And the thing about if you've got disruptive people on your team, it's you got to be careful because you can be distracted from your true mission to this person, and now you're trying to fix this person and you're missing the whole point
Mm,
of the meeting. So that's why I use the word alignment is
hmm
is we got to all pull together and be very aligned. And so I actually approached him, I think it was at the end of Tuesday, and I pulled him, I said, you clearly don't believe we can do this. Why don't you step off the team? You don't have to be on the team. You don't have to participate. And he goes, oh, yes, I do. I have to do this. And I said, well, no, actually you don't, because I have the admiral's authority to excuse you. He's like, well, no, no, I'm not going away. I'm not going away. And by Wednesday, we had a turning point. So here's what that means in a Kaizen event. We've come in, defined and measured the current process. We discover it's dysfunctional. It's not great. It's not perfect, certainly. We started analyzing these undesirable effects. These are facts that we don't like. They're almost embarrassing. When we do the root cause analysis, usually around Tuesday, we start to get down to what I call the leverage point. So leverage point is if we change this one thing, several symptoms are going to go away. Several things are going to change because of this one leverage point. I call it a root cause as well. So when we got to that, and we decided, one of the things that absolutely has to change in order for us to get better flow is a policy. Well, we don't make policy change. That's way over our head. We don't make policy change. And I said, well, this week we do. What do you want the policy to be? I'm a writer, all right? I'll write it for you. You just have to tell me what you want. And these are really bright people that know the process, whereas the senior execs, they don't know it in detail, right? They're looking at something else. So we draft the policy on Wednesday. I get it to the admiral, and on Thursday it's signed. And this guy actually came up to me at the end of the week. They actually gave me an award for that, Donnie, at the end of the week. But this guy came up to me. He said, Murphy, I got to just tell you something, man. You made a believer out of me. I was like, well, And by the way, my ego could have kicked in. First of all, early in the week, my ego could have kicked in, and it would have been, let's just debate, let's fight. The
Yeah, let's wrestle.
the
Yeah.
ego is it's fear-based and it's dualistic. So it thinks in terms of right and wrong and good and bad and you and me and win and lose. That's all ego. And I help managers and leaders transcend ego. That's what one of my courses is all about with Fuel. Beyond doubt, you transcend ego and you get into a whole different world and you see everything so differently. So like you're looking at inventory in a warehouse and you're thinking from an accounting standpoint, that's an asset. No, it's not. It's a liability because it's costing you a fortune to sit there. But in your books, it shows up as an asset. So it's a whole different way of looking at things, right? So when I get somebody to look at things differently, in any capacity, individual, management, leader, and they start to see differently, everything changes culturally. All of a sudden, instead of adding, we're subtracting. Instead of complicating, we're simplifying. We're just making things better, not best, because it's a continuous journey. I often say this, Donnie, no one today wants a Six Sigma perfect floppy disk, right? So even when you're a high-tech company and you come up with the latest chip, the latest, greatest, whatever, it's not going to last,
Doesn't matter.
right?
Yeah. I'm
Uh,
I'm curious. I want to get to the transcend ego thing, like to wrap it up. But before we do, John, just the idea of like you said it a moment ago, finding the one thing, or I think you called it the root. What
yeah.
is like, give us, is there a special weapon, a silver bullet, something in your arsenal that you can give to leaders today to help them to get down to the bottom of it? Could be questions in the Socratic method or whatever, but help them to get to the bottom of what is the root so they can actually look at it, create a mission, hopefully an action plan.
Yeah, absolutely, Don. In fact, the tool I'll offer here is the five whys, made famous by Taiichi Ono, the chief engineer at Toyota, decades ago. And the five whys is where you ask why 5 levels deep, not across, but deep. And there's almost a magic, if you will, to the fifth level.
Mm,
I mentioned that every problem on the planet at the fifth level is ignorance. We just don't know any better. By the way, the Buddha said that 2,500 years ago. So, an illustration would be, and I use this one. It's a medical, it's a chiropractic example, but it's an actual case. So let's just say somebody's got a reoccurring headache. It's not just a one-time thing. It's continuing to
okay.
reoccur.
All right.
All right. At the first level, you might end up with, here, take a pill, take an aspirin, because you're dealing with the symptom, not the root cause. And we're adding service centers over in Asia to take phone calls from customers who are calling to complain instead of eliminating the complaints
Hmm.
because we don't get to root cause. So we add more people, more training, more space, more money. That's not flow. That's why Apple says every call is a problem. We have to eliminate the need for them to call us. So that first level of why somebody's got a headache. Why do you have these recurrent headaches? Let's figure this out, right? And at the first level, you might say, well, it's because you have poor circulation and you don't have enough oxygen getting to your brain. And that's a problem. By the way, that causes a lot of brain disease and dementia and
Sure.
things like that. So not enough oxygen. So why aren't you getting enough oxygen to your brain? It's because you have poor circulation in your neck. All right. Why do you have that? Well, it's because you have inflammation. Why do you have the inflammation? It's because you're favoring one side, and you might not even know it. Why are you favoring one side? It's because your hips are out of alignment. Now, if you keep drilling down, maybe you were in an accident when you were 7, and you fell off your bicycle, and you never got it quite fixed. That's an actual case, by the way. But now, if you tell somebody who has a headache the problem is your hips, that makes no sense. What do you mean? It's my hips don't hurt. My headache.
If you
That's
go
my
straight for
head.
the,
But this is what we do in business. So, metaphorically, Donnie, the customer's calling with a problem is a headache in their mind. This is a headache, right? So why do we have this headache? It's because we have poor circulation in the business. We have poor flow. It takes too long to get whatever it is I'm ordering, whether it's a product or a service. You call up your law firm and it takes 3 days for them to get back to you. All right. It's the gap that we're not minding. well. So now, okay, now we have poor circulation in the business. Why do we have poor circulation in the business? So the five whys is getting us down deeper to
Mm.
root cause. So we have poor circulation in the business because we have a poor design and we don't have a standardized process. Why don't we have a standardized process? Why isn't that designed into our architecture, if you will? Well, because we don't know how. We don't know lean, for example. We don't think that way. So the problem is let's learn operational excellence. Let's learn these tools. Let's learn Kaizen. Then let's apply it to get a better design, to get better flow, to get better service to the customers, to eliminate problems. So instead of adding, we're subtracting. So that's just, I'd say the five whys it's a brilliant
Ah,
tool, and it leads to something, Donnie. I'll finish with this called Poka-yoke. Again, Japanese, it means mistake proof. Classic example is, Donnie was late for work. Why? Because his car wouldn't start. Why wouldn't his car start? Because the battery was dead. Why was the battery dead? Because he left the lights on. Why did he leave the lights on? Because he forgot. Why did he forget? Because there was nothing to. He's human. There's nothing to remind him. Shut the lights off. Now engineers could say, well, why don't we design some way to mistake-proof that?
mm,
And early on, if you remember, it was bells and whistles, ding, 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 ding. You should turn your lights off, Donnie. Now you don't even have to do that. It's Poka-yoke, so they just go off. You know, they,
I
they,
love it. I love it. And all the
so,
coaches said amen because like if you I feel like if you give the instruction, it's like malpractice if you give instruction without understanding. But when you ask why until you make them cry, which is kind of like my little takeaway. Like if you ask them why, and like I'm even thinking of people we're leading, not just mechanical processes, but these are people processes too, John. Pokio works
oh,
everywhere.
absolutely. You use it at home. How do I just mistake proof certain things so I don't lose my car keys? I know exactly where they are. That's
Uh,
a whole nother tool set called 5S, which we could talk about another time.
oh, we
But
definitely have to talk about that. Yes.
these tools are so helpful, Donnie. And when I go in and ask questions rather than tell anyone what to do, which I really can't anyways, and I use that Socratic pull. And these questions, including things like the five whys, and I teach them these tools, their eyeballs get big. They get fascinated. They're like, wow. And this is where, by the way, a lot of these tools you can take home with you. So when I'm teaching black belts and master black belts these tools, I'll give them an assignment. I'll say, go home tonight and use this tool on yourself. Identify some UDs, some undesirable effects in your life, which are outputs, they're symptoms. Use this root cause tool to figure out the inputs causing the outputs. That's knowledge. That's the transfer function, something you learned in seventh grade algebra. Y is a function of X. We reap what we sow. So figure it out now what you're sowing, okay, to tell you why your body weight's too high, your blood pressure's too high, you're stressed, you're anxious, because that's all that stress comes from the mind. It doesn't come from that thing out there that's you think is stressing you. It's coming from what you think of that thing out there. That's a huge shift for people because they want to blame and be the victim. I'm stressed because of my boss. I'm stressed because of my job. I'm stressed because I don't have enough time. No, you're stressed because you believe it. You think it. So that's another transformation, if you will. That's letting go of ego and moving on to, I love what Brian Biro calls we go.
Ooh.
Yeah.
We definitely have, I want to get into the ego stuff. I want to get more into the flow stuff, that just the personal, let's just want some of my personal studies. But Brian, you have been strategic, you have been tactical, and now you're going to help me diffuse the dynamite here. I want you to think about this is going to be the final question, and then we'll send it off into the ether, and you're going to tell people where they can find you and get more of John Murphy. But I want you to speak to the lonely leader, the person that feels like they need change, but they just feel completely unable. They feel helpless. Maybe it's a cultural or a systematic thing that's around them, and they just feel like throwing up their hands. And maybe they're going through the day like as an empty suit. They're just going through the motions. I want to know, like, John, give me, like, encourage that person for me, and then send us on our way by telling us where we can get you.
Yeah, well, and again, I teach these tools and these lessons, Donnie, in two of my fuel courses, Beyond Doubt and Creative Problem Solving. So
Taking
I'd
them. Those are
say,
great, by the way. Yes.
yeah, and like the five whys, DMAIC, all that Kaizen, it's in the creative problem solving. Now, what you're talking now is from Beyond Doubt. So and you get down to root cause again. If this person's lonely, if a person, Donnie, is feeling anything negative, the root cause is ego. Anything. If you feel ashamed, you feel lonely, you feel afraid, you feel anxious, you feel stressed, you feel proud, you feel angry. Now, people stop me at pride sometimes, but pride is ego because it's dualistic. The ego is fear-based and dualistic. So if you think you're the ego, which the ego wants you to think, that's your false self. If you think you're that, you're going to go through life feeling these lower frequency energies. It's all energy. So you're going to continue to attract the same energy. Misery loves company. Loneliness will attract more loneliness. It's energy. So how do you transcend that? First, you recognize this isn't me. The true me is joyful. The true me is loving life, is excited about life, is making a difference in the world, a positive difference. That's the true me for every human on the planet. What we get in our own way because we lose sight of that. I have a show coming up on Mindset Matters, my Monday Fuel show, and I talk about this in Fearless on Fridays. Is when somebody says, I changed my mind, who's the I saying that?
Hmm.
We think we're our mind. And so we think by changing the mind, it's going to change us, or that we are controlling the mind when in fact the mind is controlling us. So that's deep, I know. But when we confuse, I use it this way, we're king and queen of our own kingdom and queendom. The kingdom and queendom is the mind, and we lose sight that we have the power over the mind, and instead let the mind use us. That's the root cause. So you learn how to let go of ego and move up into a much more spiritual realm, which is what we all truly are. We think we're human beings. We're actually spiritual or energy beings temporarily in a human form. I
That's
know
good.
that's deep, but that's where we can go next.
That's going to key us up for next time. Where can we find you, John Murphy, as Come Together plays in the background? Where are we going to find John Murphy at?
Oh, I love that. Come together. JohnJMurphy.org is my website. I'm author John J. Murphy on YouTube and Facebook. And my LinkedIn profile, I use that a lot, is John J. Murphy Mystic, the mystic of management.
Let's go. Well, Come Together. Yep. The Beatles did say it. They said it first, but I think John Murphy said it better. John Murphy,
Yeah.
thank you for rocking our world. Thank you for making us just a little bit better, guys. And we know that if we can lead better, we can live better. Thank you very much, John Murphy. We'll catch you in all the places, and we'll put the links in too. By the way, John Murphy's on. Tell us about your podcast and as well. Like, what are they? And when are they?
Yeah, every Friday, 1 o'clock Eastern time, I lead Fearless, and I bring on special guests. I've got some great guests coming on in March, and I'm lining up some real big names in April. So these will be discussions around how we overcome ego, how we overcome fear and doubt, and we lead and live just an amazing life. And then every 3 weeks I host Mindset Matters, a Fuel um, podcast on Mondays, and where we really get into mindset and some of the things I just touched on.
Thank you so much, John Murphy. We will catch you on the flip side.